If you've studied illustration or you're teaching yourself, you might be wondering, what now? How do people actually turn this into a career? The creative skills you learn are only part of the puzzle, an important part, but you've also got to understand how the business side works too. After all, a freelance illustrator is a business person. They trade their creative skills for money. So I'm going to give you a beginner-friendly overview of how freelance illustration works, how illustrators find projects and clients, what those clients expect, and what you need to know to make money doing what you love. A freelancer is an individual who gets paid to do work for clients one project at a time. You are paid for your time, your talent, and your craft. You're the boss, you're the worker, you're the sales and marketing team, you're the bookkeeper, and the decision maker. It's a lot to learn. You can outsource some of those things, which we'll get into later, but let's assume for now that you're doing it all by yourself. You're self-employed and you have to pay taxes on whatever you earn, but the business structure is simple. It's just you, and aside from taxes, you keep what you earn. Illustrators work with lots of different clients, mostly on one-off projects. That means you have to be constantly seeking out new clients to introduce yourself to. Call them leads or prospects or whatever you want. But there are a lot of clients out there in the world willing to pay for illustration, and most of them don't even know you exist. So you've got to introduce yourself and let them know that you're good at what you do. That's your marketing hat, and it can be boiled down into 5 areas. Warm outreach, that's emailing, calling, or DMing people you already know, your network, who may be able to hire you. At the beginning of your career, you probably don't have much of a network, but it will grow over time. The next one is cold outreach. That's emailing, DMing, or calling clients who don't know you to introduce yourself and your work. Most illustrators are doing this. Most illustrators could be doing more of this, but it's slow and it's hard. You don't get a lot of replies or encouragement along the way, but it's an important part of the mix of tasks you'll do to make yourself known to clients. Both of these are one-to-one. You are getting in touch with one person at a time. The next 3 are one-to-many, meaning you're doing something that can be seen by lots of people at once, in theory. You could advertise, things like boosting posts on Instagram or doing Google ads or something like that. But advertising is impractical for most illustrators, especially new illustrators, because it's expensive and you need to learn the skill of creating good ads. So you'll likely lose money before you make any money. Another way to get your work seen by more people is to create a portfolio on a website that already has clients looking at it. You borrow the credibility of that well-established site and your work gets more visibility because there are already clients looking at it every day. This is portfolio platforms like the Workbook and the Directory of Illustration, HireIllo, Illustrators for Hire. There are others which you pay to appear on. And it also goes for illustration agencies too. They are hubs of illustrators' portfolios, so clients go there to browse styles and get recommendations. If you get work through an agency, they'll take a cut of your fee. That's how they make money. And they only make money if you make money, so that's win-win. The last one is making content. That's social media, blogs, YouTube, anywhere you can write or post your work or talk about your work online where there's an existing audience of people who might see it. That one takes time, but it's free, and anything you post has the opportunity to be discovered by hundreds or thousands of people. It is something you should be doing as part of your marketing, but it's not the whole story. If you want to know more about these 5 things, I have a video that goes a bit deeper here. One thing beginners aren't always prepared for is that freelance illustration work comes in waves. You might have a couple of busy months, then a month or 2 where nothing much happens. It's pretty scary sometimes, but it's just how freelancing works. Those quiet periods are when you double down on outreach, update your portfolio, and work on personal projects that will attract future clients. They're also why it's important to manage your money well, so you've got something to fall back on during slower months. Hey, do me a favor. I've put together a short illustration career quiz. I've put a link in the description. It would be so helpful for me if you could give it a try because it will give me an idea of what kind of content you would find most helpful on this channel in the future. It only takes 2 minutes to complete and it will give you an idea of where your career is now and offer some useful next steps for you to take. The link's in the description if you want to give it a go. So this is how freelance projects typically work for illustrators. They're all a little bit different, but this is a general overview. A client will get in touch with you by email to see if you're available for a project. They'll send a brief and a deadline. They may tell you what their budget is or ask you to send a quote. Different kinds of clients have different budgets. Editorial, that's magazines, newspapers and blogs, have traditionally been a good place for new illustrators to start because their budgets are at the lower end and it's a fairly quick cycle with weekly or monthly magazines. So those art directors can take a chance on a newer artist without much risk. In the higher paying areas of illustration, advertising, packaging, branding, etc., they're less likely to take a chance on a new artist because there's more money on the line and the clients are more high profile and the work will be visible for much longer. So they want to be confident that an illustrator can deliver on time professionally to a really high standard. You've got to work your way up to those high profile jobs and prove yourself and build up a good reputation before those kinds of clients will trust you enough with their advertising campaign. It makes sense, it's fair. So you'll get the brief, agree a fee, sign a contract, then you'll get to work. If you need help with contracts, I recommend you join the Association of Illustrators. That's the UK's professional body for illustration. They have a lot of great resources for artists. You don't have to be in the UK to join. They can advise you on contracts, and they also have a template commissioning agreement you can send to clients too. That was the chair. If you need help with pricing, I have a whole course on that. It goes from the basics all the way up to pretty advanced stuff. It's comprehensive. You can find that on Skillshare, and there's a link in the description where you can get a free month membership to Skillshare. I also made a free pricing calculator. I'll link to that in the description too. The Association of Illustrators have one too, which is a bit more in depth, but I think you have to be a member to use it. When you're working with a client, they'll want to see your progress throughout the project. Typically, they'll want to see the work at key stages so they can give you feedback. Usually, it's about 3 rounds of feedback. Sometimes more, sometimes less, but they're paying for this illustration and they want some creative input on how it's going to look. And they want to make sure it solves the problem they need solving, so they need to be involved in the process. And if you're working with an art director, their input can make the final illustration better. You work as a team to get the best results. You should agree how many rounds of feedback are included in the price at the start, because some clients can get a bit carried away and ask you to make little changes here and there, and before you know it, you've done twice as much work as you agreed to. If you've agreed 3 rounds of feedback and the client goes on to ask you for 6 rounds, you should charge for the extra time you spent on the project. It's fair and it's normal to do that, but you can only do that if you've agreed to clear terms at the start. Don't be unreasonable about it though. If the client has gone through the agreed 3 rounds of feedback and then asks for one small change at the end, that's not a big deal. So you can be flexible. But if they ask for a major change at the end, which means a lot of backtracking and redrawing, that's a lot more work for you and you should be paid for it. Clients are typically going to pay you a flat fee for a commissioned project. Let's say it's $1,000 for a magazine cover. When the work is done, you'll send an invoice and they'll pay you after a certain period. Make sure you check your contract for the client's payment terms. Sometimes it's 30 days, sometimes it's 45 or 60 days, sometimes it's even longer. You need to know when you should expect payment so you can plan for it. If it's a project with a bigger budget, for example, anything over $5,000, you might want to negotiate a deposit payment. So you submit a partial invoice at the start of the project, maybe 15 to 30% of the total fee, then you invoice the remainder when you complete the project. Deposit payments and staged payments are to reduce your risk and to help you pay your rent. It's smart to get into the habit of doing that. Some other ways illustrators are paid are in licensing work that you've already made. Let's say you've got an existing illustration that a client wants to use. They can pay you to use that image for their specific purpose. They're not paying you to create anything new in that case, so the fee will be lower than if you were creating something from scratch, but it's easy money for you. Publishers for books sometimes pay a flat fee, but often they'll pay you an advance plus royalties. So let's imagine they want you to illustrate a children's book and they offer you an advance of $9,000 plus 5% royalties. Because book projects take a long time, they'll typically pay you a third of that at the start, like a deposit. Then they'll pay you a third once you deliver the sketches, then the final third on final delivery. Sometimes that final payment will be tied to the publishing date of the book. Avoid that if you can, because it might be another 6 months or a year or even longer if there are any unexpected delays before the book is actually published. So it's much better for you if that final payment is linked to when you actually deliver the work. The royalties are only paid to you if the book sales exceed the advance amount. If the sales of a book only generate $8,000, you don't make any royalties. If the book makes $20,000, you make 5% of anything above that $9,000 advance. But publishers have a pretty good idea of how much a book will make, so royalties are quite rare. It's only if a book really takes off and does super well that you'll see royalty payments. When you work on a commissioned illustration for a client, you will ideally be licensing that illustration to them for a specific purpose for an agreed amount of time. After that, the illustration is yours to relicense to other clients, if you can. Over your career, you build up this archive of work that can potentially be licensed by clients over and over again without you having to create new work every time. That's only if you retain the rights to your work. I won't get into that in depth here because I have a whole video on copyright that breaks it all down for you. So for a monthly magazine, the work will be used by the client for roughly a month, and that's it. But they don't want you to relicense it to another magazine straight away, so they'll typically have a 90-day exclusivity period. After 90 days, you are free to relicense it again. For an advertising or branding project, the illustration may only be used for a few weeks, or it could be a few years, and your price will vary depending on the length of the license and how they're using the work. That's all covered in the copyright video too, so check it out. But some clients want to buy the rights to your work, meaning you assign the copyright in the work to the client. That means they own it and they can do whatever they want with it forever, and you no longer have any claim to it. You can never relicense it. You might not even be allowed to show it in your portfolio. So if a client wants that, the price should be high. If you want to find work in the first place, you've got to have a portfolio of work that attracts clients. I've talked about this in depth in several other videos. I have a whole playlist of portfolio videos, but basically the client needs to be able to look at your portfolio and imagine how they could use your style for their project. For beginners, I recommend applying your signature style to lots of different subjects and kinds of projects because it means you have more chances to catch the attention of a broader range of clients. Let's say you only show book covers in your portfolio. A publisher may be interested, but there's nothing in there for a food magazine or a tech company or an independent coffee roaster. You have one chance to succeed in publishing. But if you apply your style to some packaging, some event posters, a couple of logos, and some editorial projects, etc., you can potentially find your early projects in multiple different industries and get more varied experience. Later on in your career, you may specialize in one of those areas. Maybe you find an industry that you do really enjoy and you only want to do that. Or maybe clients from a particular area of the industry will come to you over and over again and you move in that direction naturally because those clients are telling you that you're good at that. So that's the big picture of how freelancing as an illustrator actually works. I've just scratched the surface, but if you're thinking about becoming a freelance illustrator, I hope it's been useful. It's a mix of creativity and business, and you need both to make it sustainable. Don't worry if it feels like a lot. Nobody masters all of this at the start, and most illustrators figure it out as they go. If you want to go deeper on any of these topics, finding clients, pricing your work, contracts, copyright, social media, building a portfolio, I've got dedicated videos on all of it. So dive in and feel free to leave me a comment if there's something specific you want to know and I can point you in the right direction. I'll put a playlist up here with some great introductory videos, and if you're serious about building a career as an illustrator, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next video. See you next time.